Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally cracking open the covers of a remarkably important and nearly lost dusty medical tome. We're stepping right into the dark green and gold aesthetic of 19th century medical history to explore Samuel Hahnemann's pivotal text, the Organon. Specifically, we're going to unpack the introduction to the English translation of its 6th edition, which was written by James Krauss back in 1921. Now, you might be thinking, okay, it's an old book, but it is so much more than that. This is a foundational document carrying immense historical weight because it fundamentally attempted to shift medicine from a practice of total guesswork into a rigorous, observable science.
So, here's the roadmap for our journey today. First, we'll look at rescuing the 6th edition. Second, the 4 epical figures of medicine. Third, the scope of scientific diagnosis. And finally, the triad of treatment. Let's get right into it. Starting with part 1, Rescuing the 6th edition, a true masterpiece in peril. Honestly, it's a genuine miracle we even have this manuscript to talk about today. The high stakes surrounding the survival of this essential piece of medical history read like something straight out of a thriller. It was almost destroyed on 2 completely separate occasions before ever seeing a printing press. Hahnemann's final authentic manuscript went on this crazy, perilous chronological journey. First, it somehow survived the harrowing siege of Paris during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871. But the danger wasn't over. Decades later, during the massive global conflict of the First World War from 1914 to 1918, the manuscript was again in grave danger of being lost forever when Westphalia was overrun by military forces. It literally wasn't until 1921 that the English translation we're examining today was finally published. And the survival of this text really comes down to one key individual. Dr. William Boericke provided an absolutely vital service here. He was the main instrument in rescuing this last medical manuscript for the world. In fact, the source text emphasizes that the medical profession is under a double debt to Dr. Boericke. First, for actually rescuing the physical work from possible loss, and second, for translating this 6th German edition into excellent, clear, and most importantly, unparaphrased English. By doing that, he managed to maintain the pure brilliance of Hahnemann's original thoughts without altering his meaning. Moving on to Section 2, the 4 epical figures of medicine and how they built a legacy. Now, what's really interesting about this is how it zooms out to place Hahnemann in his rightful historical context. Despite the efforts of what the source frankly calls ignorant, prejudiced, time-serving so-called medical historians who tried to diminish his legacy, this lineage elegantly maps out exactly where Hahnemann belongs. First up, we have Hippocrates, known as the Observer, who introduced the art of clinical observation, which is the absolute necessary basis for any diagnosis. Then comes Galen, the disseminator, who spread this Hippocratic teaching with massive authority across the medical world. Third is Paracelsus, the assailer, who boldly introduced chemical and physical analysis into the practice of medicine. And finally, completing this sort of Mount Rushmore of medicine is Hahnemann himself, who is categorized as the experimenter. So what is Hahnemann's specific genius? Why the title? Well, as the experimenter, he stands apart by demanding a highly methodical discovery of medicinal properties. He didn't just observe or analyze. According to the text, he fundamentally discovered the symptomatic source of both pathologic and therapeutic diagnosis. It was this exact discovery, rooted in rigorous, flawless self-experimentation with substances like Peruvian bark, that shifted the entire practice of medicine from an art of just guessing into a true science. Okay, let's dive into part 3, the comprehensive scope of scientific medicine and its diagnostic framework. We are now entering the real intellectual core of Hahnemann's work. He firmly believed that scientific medical practice meant you had to examine a patient thoroughly to gather all the signs and symptoms. This wasn't just a casual checkup, it was a highly structured, 4-part diagnostic approach. It's like a giant puzzle. Every physician under Hahnemann's scientific standard has to diagnose multiple facets of an illness. First, you diagnose the anatomic seat, asking the where, like which specific organs or parts of organs are affected. Second, the physiologic process, asking the what. Are we looking at an inflammation, a degeneration, a hypertrophy? Third, the etiologic factor, asking the how. What are the traumatic, infectious, or developmental antecedents? And finally, the therapeutic application, which is the end goal, establishing the remedial treatment for cure or the prophylactic treatment for hygiene. It is just incredibly systematic. To truly appreciate this framework, you kind of have to look at what Hahnemann was pushing against. The text draws a super sharp contrast here. On one side, it characterizes older empiric medicine as a system that essentially guesses, recommends, tries, hits and misses, and then misses and hits again. It frames it as fundamentally unstable. But on the other side, Hahnemann argues that true scientific medicine does not guess. No way. Like any true scientific art, it observes and classifies. It compares observed disease effects, sensations, and motions with known corresponding medicinal effects. Let's see how this builds directly into the practical application of this philosophy. Which brings us to our final section, the triad of treatment, combining medical, surgical, and hygienic methods. And this brilliantly illustrates what happens next. Once a physician has meticulously diagnosed the where, what, how, and end, that rigorous scientific diagnosis dictates a very specific, actionable treatment plan. Treating a patient requires a holistic, balanced combination of 3 distinct methods. There is no single silver bullet here. According to the text, a given patient's treatment is effected with a combination of surgical, hygienic, and medical means. They all hold completely equal conceptual weight in restoring a patient to health. So let's break down exactly what each piece of this triad actually targets, explicitly linking it back to the diagnostic framework we just learned. Step 1 is surgery. This addresses the where. It's utilized to remove or palliate anatomic excesses, defects, or perversions. Think of things like foreign bodies or malformations. Step 2 is hygiene. This manages the what, the physiologic imbalances, and this is incredibly broad, encompassing food, water, air, exercise, and even using vaccines or sera to call out antibodies. Then we have step 3, medicine. Medicinal substances step in to remedy the how, the etiologic effects that are simply unfixable by surgery or hygienic measures. Medicine is strictly necessary when those first 2 methods reach their limits. All of this culminates in Hahnemann's core philosophy, which is captured perfectly in this quote from the text. Remove the effects and you remove the disease, the cause of the effects. Cesset effectus, cesset causa. Because it is quite literally impossible to know every single invisible cause or antecedent of a disease, Hahnemann argued that true scientific medicine has to focus on what we can actually observe. We must treat the disease effects that we do know by applying medicinal substances whose corresponding effects we have meticulously ascertained and proven through direct experimentation. So that leaves us with a fascinating final thought. We've seen how this rescued 19th century manuscript laid out a remarkably strict framework of methodical observation, diagnostic rigor, symptom similarity, and this beautifully holistic triad of treatment. Looking at our world now, you have to wonder, how closely does modern medicine align with Hahnemann's uncompromising standard today? Have we maintained his rigorous balance of surgery, hygiene, and medicine, or has our definition of scientific rigor simply evolved into something else? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive leaves you hungry to explore even more medical history on your own.